Okay, guys, I think I just had to restart. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened. Welcome, everybody. This is Common Ground. I'm John Lombardi, your host. Happy to be with you. We're going to get started soon. Just getting a couple of texts from everybody. Glad to be with you all tonight. Thank you for being here. Right on. Yeah. Hi, Denise. Yeah, sound is better. Good. I'm glad. Want to make sure you guys can hear and see me okay. And I just want to remind you as we kick off tonight, a couple things. First of all, tonight is our 1 year anniversary. Pretty much. Whoops, I'm spelling that wrong. We actually started. The 23rd was our 1 year anniversary. So thank you guys for being with us for a full year. Oh, that's wrong. It's been a fun year. And then the important thing too to understand is that this is our last show that we're going to do from my timeline. We're going to be going to the Common Ground page. So I know that most of you watching have done this, but if you have not, please go to our. Oh, well, that's the wrong thing. I'm going to type the link in here for you to go to our Facebook page and like and follow our page so you never miss the show. So if you haven't done that yet, please go in, like and follow the page. I'm excited about tonight's show. We're going to be talking about activism, which is, exactly what's going on all around us right now, isn't it? So let me kick the show off as I always do. Good evening. You are on Common Ground, and thank you very much for being here. This is the place where we bring fear to watch it die. Fear is the great divider. We see that today more than ever. And as I say this, fear and bigotry threaten to tear our nation apart. On this show, we like to strike a blow against that fear, which divides us by discussing the most difficult topics with respect, civility, and a mind open to a differing opinion. Simply put, our goal is never to win the argument, but to model the lost art of civil disagreement. I'm happy to tell you that we've found over and over again that when we can discuss our opinions freely and openly, we can form an alliance of reason with our fellow citizens, even when we don't agree. And we discover we are not all that different, and it's not so hard to reach common ground. As always, I am your host, your host, John Lombardo. Our topic for tonight's discussion is activism. Will it build our communities or destroy them? As another week of protests have happened across the country and around the world, we've seen the characters in the American drama that is the fight for racial equality become a little bit more clearly defined. We've seen courage and honesty from all kinds of people. We've also seen depravity, senseless violence, and indifference from some. All of it begs the question, when and where is the place for activism? And if now isn't the time and place, then when and where is? So that's our topic tonight. We hope you will join the discussion. As always, this is an interactive show. We have some great guests tonight, but the first thing I'm going to do is bring in my friend, Mr. Eric Rodriguez, who is my co-host. Welcome, Eric. Glad to have you with us once again. Let me put us in gallery view. How's it going, man?
It's going well, thanks. Doing really good.
Welcome. All right, man. And so we are, as we know, live here on Facebook with all our friends. Hi, Clara. Thank you. Happy anniversary to us. Yes, absolutely. So, Eric, I wanted to, before we bring on our first guest of the evening, I just wanted to, for you and I to touch base, looking into this continuing unfolding global drama that is. It started out, with actually, I mean, it's been going on since the dawn of mankind, actually. But this particular thing, you can kind of trace it back to a singular incident of a man being murdered in broad daylight, and it, quite rightly so, caused an outrage, a huge outpouring of anger and grief, and it's led to where we are. What are your thoughts about what you've seen in the past week and where we are?
Well, as you said, this isn't the only time this has happened. We've seen this over and over again. Just in the last few years, we've seen people that have been killed or excessive use of force. that have led to protests or demonstrations and complaints of various types. But this, as we said a couple weeks ago, and it still is true, I think this is very different, and there's a lot of circumstances that have led up to this, and perhaps being on stay-at-home orders and the pandemic and people being cooped up really helped people to maybe see what was going on more, maybe be able to feel. I know you and I also talked about this, may be a tangential, but you and I talked about how stay-at-home order has really allowed you and I to slow down in our lives and be able to kind of notice what was up with us personally.
Sure.
And I suspect that's true for a great many people all across the country and maybe around the world, that a slower pace really allows for us to be able to notice and feel more clearly. So I'm daily, I see things daily that I'm pretty amazed with, that we are having conversations about reforms, and institutions of power are considering reforms in policy that we just couldn't have those conversations before now.
Right. And do you so you and I have said this a few times. We feel like it's different this time. We feel like while this is a topic and a challenge that is not new to American culture and American society, it seems like the response this time is different, and for me, largely in a positive way. In terms of, I believe that the protests are very well designed and well executed for the most part, and that they're working. That people are actually taking a long and deeper look at these challenges, and there's almost a deeper willingness to look into the core issues behind this. And I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I have hope that this could actually bring about some changes that would make our society more peaceful, more united, and less threatening to a lot of good people.
Well, you and I are both hopefully not tragically, but certainly overly optimistic and all. That's just the way you and I roll. We hope for good things, and we're always sort of looking at positive transformation, and we certainly see that. And one of the ways that there's unquestionably, this is different in the numbers and the longevity of demonstrations. I believe that this is the longest, the most sustained sort of protest on this topic that we've ever seen. And I don't know that we've ever seen this many people demonstrate worldwide for anything in our lifetime. I mean,
I haven't either. No, I don't think we have. So let's bring on our first guest. Let's get into this discussion now. I want to say this to all our viewers. This is an interactive show. I have a couple of things I want to ask you to do for me. Couple things. So we're using the interactivity of Facebook Live and Zoom. So I want your questions to get answered. For example, Mark, you just asked a question, and I'm going to pose that question to our guest who is coming on in just a moment. I want to ask you guys to, first of all, when you type your question in, please copy it, highlight it and copy it, because the way Facebook is designed, they move quick and I might not see it. If I don't answer your question, please repost it so I can answer it, because I don't see all of them and I want to get as many of them answered as I can. And secondly, please be very clear in what you are saying. Partial responses like "that's not true" or "I disagree" don't work, and let me tell you why. There's about a 12 to 15 second delay. It's called latency. So from the time we say something to the time you guys see it, it's about 12 to 15 seconds later. And so what we're talking about is no longer what we're seeing from your post. So please be thoroughly clear about what you want to address in your question, and we will definitely do our best to get you into the conversation. So thanks for being here. And with that, I want to bring on our first guest tonight. So this gentleman, it's going to take me a while to introduce this guy. So Carl Parrish is the founder and chapter leader of Represent Arizona, a local chapter of Represent US, which is the largest grassroots organization for anti-corruption in the United States. Their movement has already helped to pass more than 100 state and local anti-corruption initiatives. And in 2017, Carl worked with Tempe City Council members to push Prop 403, a groundbreaking and binding reform act that requires dark money organizations to declare the source of their funds. Carl continues to work with local city governments and their constituencies to understand the American Anti-Corruption Act, which is very, very important, and why it's so important and vital to proper democracy. And for his day job, Carl's a senior software engineer for a local startup that utilizes AI to diagnose medical illnesses, hoping to reduce medical costs for thousands of people. Carl, that's a long resume, dude. I'm really happy to have you with us tonight. Good to see you, man. So, Carl, your microphone isn't on. Will you unmute yourself? Please turn your microphone on and let us hear you as well as see you. There you go, man.
You guys hear me now?
Yeah, we got you now, man.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Really good to have you here tonight, Carl. Thanks for being here, my friend.
Thank you for the invite. Really happy to be here for your 1-year anniversary. It's pretty
right
awesome.
on, man. This is a prestigious thing for you to be part of the show. I hope you appreciate it. So, Carl, this is my co-host, Eric Rodriguez. We've been friends for a very long time. Eric works Eric, why don't you tell Carl what you do, and that way everybody who's watching can hear as well. Just give them a quick rundown of what your background is.
Hi, Carl, and it's nice to meet you. I work for a nonprofit organization in the town that John and I live in, Ventura, California. We support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and I do some advocacy work for that agency and support independent living program. And interested in the topic of activism and advocacy. And I think John said a little bit in the introduction there. I would love to hear from you about, to explain to everyone what the Anti-Corruption Act is, so we can start with that info.
Yeah, that would be great.
Right. Okay. My little quick elevator pitch is that we primarily have identified 3 core problems with our government system and the corruption that's available there. And so, increasing the integrity of voting. So things like ending gerrymandering, having democracy vouchers, things like that falls under that category. Ending dark money practices. So things like transparency of, who is donating to campaigns. It's ridiculous how hidden that money is currently available now, and how much the powers that be are fighting to keep it that way. And then ending the revolving door system where, I'm a congressperson or I'm a senator, and then I pass bills for such and such a company with a guarantee that the moment that I stop being a senator or congressperson or somebody who supposedly is doing the will of the people, all of a sudden, now that I have a guaranteed job that I'm going to work at such and such a company, realistically, even if you aren't intentionally creating a bias with that, and I think, we'd have to be pretty naive to believe that that's not really true.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you know that you're going to be working at such and such a company in 5 years and 4 years and 2 years, it just creates automatically you're going to lean towards trying to make that company better, which may not be in the best interest of your constituents.
So, Carl, I want to ask you a basic question to sort of kick this discussion in the direction I want it to go in. Thank you for that. Obviously the corruption in our political system, in my opinion, is at the root of most of our societal problems. But what is the role of activism in look, we've got this situation going on, of course, right now with clear, in my opinion, just my opinion, clearly there is an abuse of power that we are seeing from law enforcement agencies. Of course, I know not all of them, but it makes sense to me that this is the result of a systemic issue. What is the role of activism in helping implement change? Because it's continuously puzzling to me to see how many people who are American citizens who become very, very resistant and non-supportive of activism when they don't see the point of the specific act, if that makes sense. So what is the role of activism in our society to fix these problems?
So I think there's a couple of different things. One, if you follow the American myth, this is supposed to be a country for the people, by the people. So as a citizen of the United States, I feel like we have to take active role in government. We can't keep advocating the responsibility onto the people who we voted for. We have to make sure that they're actually doing what we voted for them to do. And I think that very often we don't do that. And I think our system is created to create barriers for us to do that. So part of being an activist is about removing those barriers, making sure that we are being part of what's happening in our government. But a very important part of that is also educating people around us and inspiring them to actually take action. What are the actions? Creating a strategy so people can do something and not just feel like they're unempowered. I feel like a lot of people believe that there's no ability to make change at this point. And that's a really depressing place to be.
Yeah.
But it also becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you believe that there's nothing that you can do, then you don't do anything, then the powers that be just continue to run however they want to run things. So part of being an activist, I believe, is inspiring and encouraging people to take action and giving them a plan. It's like, okay, you want to see change. What do you want to see? What are the policies that you want? And then this is how we go about doing that. And so then the third part of what I feel like an activist is about finding out what are the government rules and procedures to actually make those strategies reality, so that you can help create more strategies and then actually implement those things. So it's also a way, I feel like part of what I get to do is I get to interact with city council members, state legislators, and stuff like that, to try to make it clear to them what the community actually wants. Part of the problem is big money donors. If you put $1 million into a campaign, hell, put $200,000 into a campaign, you're going to make very sure that that senator, that representative is very clear on what you want passed. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of us, everyday people, to get together to have the same kind of voice, the same kind of impact on our representatives, so that they know this is something that we want to happen or we need to happen.
Is that why activism is so important, Carl? Because it's so hard to get those wheels to move for people rather than money, rather than
yes.
And I noticed you. I agree with you about that. I asked the question because I thought I knew the answer. And Mark made a comment. Mark, watching the show, said the problem is that few go to the polls to vote or even educate themselves on what is going on. And I think that is a huge problem too, Mark. In fact, our in the last election, the last presidential election we had, it was those who chose not to vote who elected the president effectively. Do you feel that? How is it possible? So I'm reading. Look, I'm like anybody else. I'm at the mercy of the information that's available to me. I don't I work really hard because of what I do on the show, and one of the reasons I started the show was I think that it's really easy to get trapped in misinformation these days. So I want to have a place where we are responsible about the information we put out there, and we can have a good conversation. But I want to ask you something. How is it possible that they can legally shut down all those polling sites in Kentucky? Man, how is that possible?
We allow it. I mean, like at the end of the day, we're coming to a point where a question has to be answered. And I think the default answer has been going on for, past 40 some odd years or whatever. But the question is our government run by money, or is it our government run by the people? And
I know the answer. Yeah, I know the answer.
Yeah. I mean, so a few years ago, Princeton did a study that showed that the opinion of the everyday average person had like no impact on whether policy was passed or not. That's ridiculous in a society that claims to be for the people. Yes, we are a democratic republic. We're not a pure democracy, but in theory, at least, we are still a democratic republic. There should be representation of our thoughts, our ideas, and there just isn't. So we have to change that. And right now, the primary lever that we have for that is voting, because the people who are in power want to stay in power, and the way that they stay in power is they win the elections. So, I mean, that's one layer that we can do. But protests. I know a lot of people question the effectiveness of protesting. I will say this about protesting: it gets people's attention.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily change policy, but when you have protests that get people attention, then now you can get a lot of people behind on policy and actually taking action. Now, if you don't do that follow through, then protesting is not very effective. But when you do that follow through, we see in every major change in US history, it always started with a spearhead of protesting. And so it's important, it's vital. It's not the whole thing. There has to be strategy behind it as well.
Of course, yeah. And you said that that one of the levers we had was this activism, but it's so frustrating to me that I'm proud to tell you that I have a healthy communication with a lot of people who are both conservative and liberal on this show. Mm-hmm. And something that drives me crazy is when we talk about getting money out of politics, when we talk about term limits for senators, when we talk about the corruption in the election processes, everybody agrees on this.
Yes.
And I believe that the people that stand to lose the most from that dissemination of equality and power do a very good job of keeping us divided over things that aren't as important. But this isn't one of those things. We are divided on this issue of the police and their treatment of black communities, and this is a valid issue. And tell us a little bit about your perspectives as an activist on current events.
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, I've lived as a black man in the United States my entire life. So, I've been very clear and very aware that the role of police is vastly different depending on the color of your skin in the United States.
Has that been your experience directly, Carl?
Oh yeah, definitely my experience. For a long time, I tried to believe that it was a class issue. I've been blessed to be part of some very successful startups at this point in time. So class is no longer like a barrier for me. And yet I still have issues. One of the stories that I often tell is how when I first started getting pretty good money, I got a red Dodge Viper, and it was kind of flashy. I was about 23, 24 years old. But I got stopped by the same police officers for 16 weeks in a row. And every time they asked me, whose car was it? And I'm like, after about the 6th time, you're like, hello, you've seen my registration, for 6 weeks. Why are you still asking me whose car this is?
How is this baked into that culture? How is this baked into law enforcement culture?
Well, there's a lot of different parts, and it's not just law enforcement culture. It's our media in general. I mean, a lot of times, the reason why I think it's important to make the distinction between racism and bias or prejudice is because it's quite possible for Black people even to be racist. It's part of the systemic issues that we run into. If you're walking down an alley and you see a Black person and you're suddenly more afraid than you were before you saw the Black person just because of the color of their skin, that's a racist impulse. It doesn't matter if you're white or Black or brown or yellow or whatever. If in the media, the way that it's been pushed to us, you see a Black person in a hoodie, you instantly know that, something's about to go down. It's the shortcuts that they use in Hollywood and in lots of other places, in our education system, the things that we choose to teach, the fact that, almost none of the massacres that were portrayed against Black people in our U.S. history are found in any textbooks that are taught in schools.
Yeah, so I want to tell you something. There was a lot of talk last week or 2 weeks ago about what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There was a lot of talk about this affluent Black community. When they were, I didn't know what they were talking about. I'd never heard of it. I had to go and look it up myself. I'd never been, I didn't know what it was. I didn't hear. Now I know what it is, and it's an atrocity, and it's completely something I never even knew about.
Right. And so that's probably one of the most well-known, but I've been tracking for the last couple of years. I've got 30 that I have evidence on that, finally people have admitted to. And there's a big longer list of people who are like, you need to look into this, you need to look into this, you need to look into that. I have like hundreds of those that, I'm trying to find evidence on. But right now I have 30 that when pressed, people will admit to have happened, and yet none of them are in our history books. The very fact that the bombing and move in 1985, in my lifetime, something like 18 people were dead, 5 of them children. It destroyed, I think, about 60 different homes, something like that, in Philadelphia, and almost no one knows about that. And it certainly isn't taught in our schools. So anyways, my point is what we choose to teach, what we see in the media, all these things have an effect on how we get reaction. I just had a conversation with someone the other day, and they were saying that, they truly believe that Black people are more violent than white people. And, I said, well, to be fair, you have to take, social status into account and all of these kinds of things. And they said, yeah, that sounds fair. I haven't been able to find the data, but I'm still convinced that Black people are more violent. And I was like, based on what? And this is a relatively intelligent person who often backs his beliefs with facts. And so therefore is part of the reason why I continue to have debates with him. And yet this time he had no facts, and he was still ready to die on that position. And I was like, okay, we can't really move past that if that's your belief system, and you don't have any facts or figures, but you can't move past on that one.
It's talk on this show, that right now, I mean, we don't even, of course, the history books are not covering things the as thoroughly as we would like, or they ignore certain groups or certain events. But even right now, when we have access to so much media, we are in a position where people get into echo chambers and they're only listening to certain things. And John and I were, in the intro, and it's astounding that some people draw the conclusions that they do, and it's because they, we have people that are literally just listening to different histories of things that are happening right now today. They're just getting completely different information. And one of the things that we try to talk about a lot on this show is to when you see something, do some research about it, and try to find multiple sources, and try to talk to people before you just adopt something, or ignore something that doesn't sound right to you. Research, Carl. I'm interested.
I don't want to sound like I'm like putting a tinfoil hat on, but the powers that be intentionally create our educational system in a way that deprioritize critical thought. When you look at things like the Lost Cause, the Daughters of the Confederacy. So part of what inspires me about the Daughters of the Confederacy is, this was created during a period of time when women didn't have the right to vote. And yet they made such a lasting impact on the South that to this day, it takes a mountain full of evidence to move people off of the teaching that they made sure was in every history book, all the statues the debate that we have today about, are these statues historic? Why are there U.S. bases named after traitors to the country? Who does that? But the Daughters of the Confederacy were able to successfully make that happen. Again, in a time when women didn't have the right to vote. So, like in their particular case, I think they used it for evil, but it shows how powerful activism can be if you use it correctly.
Well, so we're starting to talk about these statues and emblems, and that's a perfect opportunity for us to bring on our next guest tonight, who is a young man who was one of the organizers of the protest in favor of the removal of Father Junipero Serra in front of City Hall here in our own town. So we're going to bring on Ben Leanos. Hey, Ben, how are you, man? Nice to have you with us.
Good. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
So that's Eric with the red hair, and that's Carl with no hair.
Okay, I see everyone.
Very good. So Ben, obviously you're involved in local activism here in Ventura, California. Carl is involved in activism in Arizona, but I think that activism is important to all four of us. Tell us a little bit about the story behind this statue and what you guys were looking to accomplish and how that's all going. I want to hear a little bit about it.
So the statue has been there in some form since I think it was 1932 was the first one that was erected. It was concrete, in front of City Hall. It was actually made by like a local Ventura artist. That one was up since from 1932, I think, until 1989, when it was replaced by like a bronze cast. There's also a wooden version of the same statue that was carved. A lot of people think the wooden one was the original one, but it was actually the concrete one. And the wooden one was carved with like basically to be like a replica of the concrete one. During the same time though as the bronze one, and the wooden one sits inside of City Hall. Our goal was basically to pressure city. I mean, okay, so like we planned the protest. The petition was circulating a few days before the protest was supposed to happen. The city like released a statement saying that to kind of like quell us, I guess, that they're going to take it down. Like they're working with like the mission, and then Julie, who's the tribal chair of the Veterano Barbareño Chumash, to bring down the statue, like a peaceful resolution, they said, kind of implying that like we were like an angry mob or something, which we weren't really. Our language was a bit, I guess, militant, but it wasn't like,
What was some of that language, Ben? What was the language? Why? Tell us what the perspective of the Chumash people and yourself. Why does the statue need to come down? What does it have? What does it represent? Tell us about that, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of people. Wait 1 second.
And by the way, I want you guys to know while Ben is taking care of that, I went to that school. I went to Catholic school there at
at the mission. It's my
the mission. So I remember that.
Birthday.
Yeah.
So I'm here, and well, the party's about to start, but
we won't keep you long. We won't keep you long. I just wanted to hear about what you're doing.
What was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So I mean, like, I'm sure. I mean, some people don't know. I'm not gonna say I'm sure we all know, but like, many people know that, like, the missions, Junipero Serra, and basically colonization, wiped out the original people of this land, like almost totally. Obviously, there's some people who are still alive, but like, I guess estimates right now is that there are 16,000 Chumash people, and before he arrived, Serra, there was 300,000, all throughout like the California coast area. Yeah, and so we see that like this man who's basically responsible for genocide is like prominently displayed in front of City Hall. We see statues coming down all over the country and all over the world of like people who like, like who've gotten like, I guess, monuments to their greatness according to like the government or like the slavers or whoever, like the Confederacy, like, like people who now they were bad then and they're bad now, but now people are like taking a stand and
Well, Ben, I have a question for you from one of our viewers. He asks, so pulling down a monument isn't out of anger?
No, I'm not saying that we aren't angry. Of course we're angry. This man is in front of City Hall who killed, raped, and enslaved thousands. There's 3,600 dead bodies buried at Ventura Mission. And that's just what the Catholic Church will admit to. I'm sure, there's probably plenty more. Yeah, we're angry. We're definitely angry.
Okay, and then Sarah said, Trail of Tears, as a Native American, I disagree with the removal.
Mm-hmm.
Leave it as a lesson. So let me ask you that question. I mean, I have an answer in my mind to that, but I wanted to have you tell everybody, why don't we leave these up as lessons about the past?
Yeah, I totally get that. Like, like, history you don't learn, you're doomed to repeat, whatever. I don't think that a statue in front of City Hall is really a valuable history lesson, especially one that doesn't say anything about the people who were enslaved or were raped or killed by him and his cronies, I guess. Like, I don't think that is you don't learn about history from monuments, and you don't learn about you can, but this one in particular, it was the plaque says nothing about that. Also, you can learn about history from other things. Like the mission is there. I think the mission is horrible, but I'm not for like burning down the mission or whatever. People are like, what's next? Like first you take away this man and then you burn down the mission. Like, like I think that's a history lesson. And like, like in Germany, like Auschwitz still stands. It's like a horrible reminder of what happened. There's no statues to Hitler though. Like, you don't learn, it's different. Yeah.
I'd like to take a bit of that and talk about context. Ben referenced that, but context matters.
Yeah.
When we rise people literally on a pedestal, we're saying that they're heroes. We're presenting them as in a favorable light. When you have something in a museum or in a history book, then yes, you can talk about the context, you can explain, and I think it's important that, which ironically we don't, in our history books,
our heroes, when you look at history, you look at like Woodrow Wilson or you look at Teddy Roosevelt, and it's just amazing how much, or even Columbus, how much of the negative about those people are not present in our history books. But we could put those things in history. What we can't do is we can't put them on statues. And so to me, it's a very, very big difference between pretending that this person didn't exist and or perhaps putting them in history versus putting literally on a pedestal to present them as heroes for some of the greatest villains in our nation's history.
There's a couple of folks in our viewers who don't agree. Sarah said, "My grandmother was a Native American slave. I'm sorry, I politely disagree." And Mark said, "Ben, they don't teach the Holocaust in German history, but they have the buildings like Auschwitz as a reminder of a dark time and not to repeat it." So I want to respond to those two viewers, guys, and then I'll let Ben and Carl, of course, take it over as our guests. But I put this to the test. I was in Tennessee and I was in Georgia within the last 18 months and went to look at some of these statues. And I'm sorry, they are not reminders of the evils of the past. They are glorification and holding up of these people as heroes. The plaques recognize these people as heroes of that community. That is the truth. There was nothing on those plaques of the statues I looked at that said this statue exists to remind the United States of America to never enslave people again. There was nothing of the sort there. I think that it's true that in America, we build statues as monuments to people that we respect. We don't build statues typically to teach dark lessons. That's just not the way it is. If that were the case, I would support this, but I'm just telling you, I didn't see those things.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, a statue prominently displayed in its own little park in front of City Hall. This thing is like 9 feet tall, by the way. Like you see pictures of it and you don't really and it's literally on a pedestal, and he himself is 9 feet tall. It's crazy.
And I went to the school and I was taught that he was almost a saint.
Yeah, no, he's been sainted. He was sainted, I think, in 2015 by Pope Francis.
Right.
I think that there's definitely a difference between removing him from history, which is not anyone's intention, and it's not anyone's intention to like remove the Confederacy from history either. The intention is to say statues, especially ones that are prominently displayed literally on a pedestal, are people who we celebrate, people that we want to build a monument to. I think that we need to recognize that that these people don't necessarily need that, and saying that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't want people to learn about them. Like, we do, but we want people to know about them with context as to what they did.
Accurate context. Yes,
for sure.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm
sorry. I have a question I want to ask. Carl.
I just want to quickly
go ahead.
Interject this. It's real quick. I just wanted to say that I think it's also important that we look at the source and the motivations as far as we can of who put the statues up. And, in a lot of these cases, majority of these statues that are in contention right now were all placed around the 1930s, early 1940s, and there were reasons for that. And we can go back and look, and the people who placed them were very clear about why they put them there. And I think that's important when we're making the decisions on should they stay up or not.
So we've got another. This is a good point. Mark brings this up, and I want you guys to discuss this. He said, let's look at, so now this is going to take us into what's going on in the current time. And Ben, if you need to run, man, just let me know.
It's okay. People are getting here, but it's okay.
Okay. I don't want to take too much of your time up, but I always get caught up in the conversations and really enjoy them. And I really want to respect your time and everyone. So here's the statement. So we're talking about these statues being idolized. He says, let's look at Floyd then. He's referring to George Floyd. He had a bad past, but he's been put up as a martyr and portrayed as a saint in a sense. So I think that is actually, I'm really glad Mark brought this point up, because by trying to canonize an individual, I think that you give fodder to the resistance of your movement. Now, listen, having who George Floyd was up to the moment, a police officer put his knee on his neck and murdered him in broad daylight, is irrelevant, okay, to this larger issue here. I don't care what the guy did, unless he was posing a threat to those people and that police officer. That police officer committed a murder by doing what he did. But there are people. Carl, you probably saw that Candace Owens video. Man, every white person I know was sharing that video of her saying that she would not wear the T-shirt. And if you guys don't know who Candace Owens is, she's a conservative, young, very bright lady. She's a young conservative black woman who's become very popular recently. But saying some things that are controversial within the black community. What do you guys think about that? About the George Floyd circumstance?
Well, for me personally, I feel like the movement to try to canonize or to put George Floyd up on a pedestal is actually created by the opposition, who feels that their justification for killing an unarmed black man is to prove somehow that he was less than perfect. That has been their strategy for many, many years, and it's worked very often. They've been able to say, such and such, was selling cigarettes, and so therefore he deserved to be killed. Such and such was wearing a hoodie in our neighborhood, and so therefore they deserve to be killed. The script is to try to prove that the person is not perfect, and so therefore it was justified.
But Carl, the people that I have absolutely seen that, and I agree with you entirely. However, I've also seen people that are part of the Black Lives Matter movement really, canonizing George Floyd, making T-shirts, wanting to
I think
honor
the
him.
important thing there is that the distinction is people are talking about the action, the moment that happened, not George Floyd. No one is saying George Floyd was our hero. Nobody is like we were voting for him for president, or he was our leader, or anything like that. I mean,
and he doesn't need to be either.
No.
Huh?
I said he doesn't need to be either.
Exactly. He doesn't need to be. Our argument is not that he was perfect and therefore his death makes something matter. Our point is he was human and his death should matter. We don't need him to be perfect. We don't need to idolize him. We don't need to put him on a pedestal. We do need to make sure that the moment that his death is broadcast, that everybody knows about it and everybody's confronted with it, and everybody has to choose a side on that.
Yeah.
John?
Yes, Eric, go ahead.
I think that there's a few different things here that come up for me, and one of the things that happens quite often is it becomes difficult for people to hold two different opposing thoughts in their mind at the same time. If you look at George Floyd's life, he had a history of arrests. He also had a history of mentorship and doing work in his church. He was a complete whole human being, just like all of us are. And I think that when there's been this movement, just like there is with Breonna Taylor, to say their name, say this murder person's name, they were a human being. And that sometimes gets mischaracterized by those who don't want to jump on the bandwagon, as somehow trying to canonize or turn it into a hero. No, it's just we want to make sure that we're not ignoring the humanity of somebody whose life was taken. And it's totally fine for each one of us to be complex and to be imperfect. And that's who we are as people. And it has nothing to do with, like what happened. There is no deserving being murdered in the street that way. And so I think that also ties in a little bit with this conversation with Sarah or with many of the other individuals that we're talking about as a nationwide conversation, as far as yes, there were, it's as if people want to pay attention to just one part of the story. And, this person did these good things. I saw a video, I've seen videos about whether it's Robert E. Lee or Father Serra. I've seen videos of people saying he was a good man. Well, define that for me, or, point to some good things, but then also let's talk about the other side. And I think that, certainly those us four don't think it's appropriate for somebody who did such terrible things as Father Serra did to build a monument. A monument really is for some person or some event that it's supposed to inspire us. We are supposed to aspire to be like the person in the monument, and it's inappropriate. Like you can't say, and really even the good things that he did, you probably should be better ascribed to the native people. I mean, people talk about the building of the mission. He didn't build that mission. The native people did, and they were slaves as they were doing it. For me, I don't buy the argument that it's a reminder, just like it doesn't sound like you do either, John, that it's a reminder of, no, there is no plaque there that's saying that he killed all these people and then, would, rape, murder, killed, enslaved. It doesn't say that. And if it did, would people still want it to be up there?
Carl made the point. He said we need to understand the context of who built the statue for. So I can tell you that as a Catholic, the Catholic Church built that statue absolutely in honor of Serra. They made him a saint. So they absolutely built that statue in honor of him. Barbara has said, she said, I am both Chumash and Spanish, along with German Jew. My ancestors helped build that mission in Santa Barbara. It was the Spanish that came. The Spanish also brought it natives from during Mexico. It was not the Portuguese. Things that happened under the 1% umbrella were horrible, but we must learn to forgive and move forward. Wiping out history through the attempt of removing statues doesn't change the heart and risks repeating itself in history. So Barbara's point is that if we tear down these statues, we risk forgetting history. My question back to you, Barbara, would be, is that how we teach history? Do we, I have two children. I don't ever remember saying, okay, kids, it's time to learn about XYZ. Go down and look at the statue. I think that history needs to be taught in classrooms and books. And we need to acknowledge that we erect statues in honor of people. That's our culture. So, hey, why not have some new statues?
Yeah.
There's a Teddy Roosevelt statue that they're going to tear down. And it's not because Teddy Roosevelt's this terrible guy, but it's totally demeaning to Native American and Black people the way the statue's built. So let's build a new statue that makes everybody, if I'm sitting next to my friend Carl Parrish, and we're in another state having lunch, and there's a statue that demeans some painful part of his past, and I don't give a crap about that statue. Let's get rid of it. If it's that's how I feel about it. That's my response to that. Thank you, though, Barbara. I appreciate your comment. That was a great point. How you doing, Ben? Do you need to head out, or you good?
I should probably head out soon. One last thing, though.
Please do.
I think that history is like a great reminder, I guess. I think that if it's so neutral and the people who want the statue to stay up were just because it's history, like, okay, why not build a statue to people who were enslaved or killed by him, or the people who actually built the mission? Because we know that he wasn't out there working. If it's totally neutral, then they wouldn't have a problem with a Native American family, a Native American woman, a Native American worker up there. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Ben. Ben, thank you so much for being with us.
Sure.
Ben,
yeah, thanks so much for having me.
This is still going on. The discussion about whether or not to take down the statue is still going on. So, is there anything you'd like to say to people just in terms of getting involved and activism for this specific?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, give me a website or something. I can type it in the comments.
Well, we actually don't have a website, but on July 7th, there's going to be a virtual City Hall meeting regarding the statue. and then they're asking for public comment. So I mean, you can call in. I'm actually not. I tried to get on the city hall last week regarding unrelated. It was like about like defunding the police. But and I could not figure out for the life of me how to do it. And I think it's probably that way by design to like keep like the masses out. But whatever. That's a different issue. But
they're also really bad at that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like if you can manage to get on, then definitely get on and give your public comment. Yeah, that's it.
All right, Ben, thank you so much for your time tonight, man. Appreciate having you.
Yeah.
I just want to
Have fun at
interject
the
real
party.
quick for that one issue. If you have a League of Women Voters nearby, they are usually, if you have a local chapter, they're usually very, very efficient at dealing with things like that, and they can be a wealth of information on how to navigate those waters.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Thanks, Carl. Oops. Oh gosh, I didn't. I think I kicked Ben out too soon. Ben, are you? Let me bring you back in, man. Sorry about that, Ben.
That's okay. I was just saying bye.
Okay. Have fun at the party, man. Thank you once again.
Okay, thanks. You too.
Appreciate you.
Bye.
Okay. I want to reiterate. I grew up here. I went to that school, and obviously I'm not Native American. I don't have a problem. I don't really have a dog in the fight, and I also don't have any problem if people want that statue to be replaced. I just don't. I don't see that as a threat to my family and my ancestors' understanding of local history. So I guess I need more help understanding that from people. I just don't see it that way. Let's talk a little bit about something, Carl. I want to talk about something that really freaked me out this week. Mm-hmm. There's a gentleman named Sean King, and he is a Black Lives Matter activist. He's got 1.5 million followers on Facebook. He does a great job of organizing. And this, I know that there's people out there doing stupid things, but this man is all about. I follow him on Instagram, and I don't want to necessarily support everything that he's all about sometimes, but I noticed that whatever he's doing, we're making phone calls to local government, we're sending letters, we're having this demonstration this week. This is the message. It's very organized, it's peaceful, and it's very effective. Mm-hmm. This week, so Sean King has been very active in recent issues, around. He was part of this huge observance. I believe it's in Kentucky for Breonna Taylor, and he this week discovered through and he shared all of this on his podcast. There was a Facebook group of former law enforcement officers in Long Beach, California, who were actually talking about killing him.
Yes.
I also read about a young girl in Madison, Wisconsin, who was set on fire.
Set on fire. Yeah.
I could read you a bunch of things. There's a bunch of things. Look, I follow Lee Merritt, who is the attorney who testified in front of Congress last week. Follow Sean King. I'm not taking this stuff off of crazy conspiracy theories in YouTube. I'm watching the videos that they're posting on their site. Some of it's even police body armor videos of some pretty violent stuff. Why is all of this coming to such a head? Is it because the activism is working?
Partially. I believe that, just a basic physical principle is, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So I think it goes back further than that. I think Obama being president pushed a lot of people past their breaking point. I believe that Trump, being the follow-up president, has kind of validated a lot of people. So a lot of issues that were underground and not pushed before are certainly now believed to be okay. It's okay to say that, you know, the president has said that, you know, the traitors who fought for the Confederacy, that they were American heroes. So when the president says that, then that backs up anyone else who wants to make that claim that these were American heroes. It's like, how are you defining that? They betrayed their country. They fought and killed U.S. soldiers. How can you defend them? But the president is defending them. So that has emboldened a lot of people and a lot of actions that previously weren't happening, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I did.
Go ahead, Eric.
Point for me, you know, you know, as Carl was just saying, there has been this sort of, you know, this pendulum switch, you know, swinging back and forth, and there were a lot of bills that were passed that led to more transparency and more oversight for police during the Obama administration, and the police were not happy about that, you know. And during some of the protests, I remember a couple years back, there was a statement put out by the president of the Fraternal Order of Police, which is the largest police union in the country, probably I think in the world, and the president of the Fraternal Order of Police called the Black Lives Matter protesters a pack of rabid animals. This is sort of like the head, you know, I mean, law enforcement guy he's the one representing all police in our country. And, you know, we remember when our president of our country said, you know, talked about I've seen it many times over, you know, he's talking about police putting somebody in the car, and he's like, don't be too nice. You always put your hand on their head so they don't hit, you know, and these kind of statements, they affect people. And as Carl was suggesting, there's, you know, in this swing back, one of the reasons why the Fraternal Order of Police endorsed Donald Trump was because of this oversight that was put in the previous administration. They didn't want that oversight. And we see that right now there's a lot of resistance. And going back to the question that you just asked about some of that resistance, you know, as we know, I have a degree in psychology, and I think our country is much like the psyche of an individual. And when we threaten our defenses, they fight back. So as we threaten the position of power of certain individuals or certain organizations, you know, there's a backlash, and that's what we're seeing. And I think that we see that. You would think that any rational police officer after the killing of George Floyd would be on their best behavior. Well, you know, in the past, however long it's been, 2 months, I've seen 100 videos of unprovoked violence by police. And that's with the knowledge that this terrible thing happened, that people all over the country, in fact, all over the world, are saying, hey, we need more oversight, we need less police brutality. And these are the kinds of things that we're seeing. So I think that it, much like a person's, you know, psyche, we're seeing the defenses kick up.
Well, yeah. And do you also think that some of this is fear? Like I see, I'm going to talk about this in my closing statements, but I see news channels that are committed 24/7 to fomenting fear. I've heard, so let's talk about Fox News. And the last week I heard Tucker Carlson and Rudy Giuliani on Fox News say they are coming for you. They're coming for your things. So is being fomented, in my opinion, into a rabid fear. It's easy to do that. And
Who
sorry, go ahead.
I want to bring back up a previous topic that you were talking about, and that was how so many people have common cause on so many issues that it's ridiculous that our representatives are not making those things just done. It should, like some of them is high. So I was in a documentary a few years ago called Unrigged, and there was something like 17 different issues. Some of them, 90% of the population were all in favor of. So you would think, well, those are low-hanging fruit. Let's get those done. But the politicians, they get funded, they get perceived as being powerful by taking a side and pressing really hard on one side or the other for issues that we're not in agreement on. So you have all this political theater of, well, let's seem like we're fighting really hard, even though we know that, and then we can blame the other side for not allowing it to happen. And that theater requires there to be villains, and it requires there to be heroes. It's like creating a sports team. You want there to be a rivalry, because if you own a sports franchise and you have a rivalry, when you play them, there's going to be more butts in the seats. That's just how it works. So our political system, our police force, our media, all these things, and we've gotten to the point now where so few people control what we see in the media that they can basically create the narrative. And so if you don't have critical thought, if you're not open to hearing from people outside of your echo chamber, it's easier actually to not hear the other side. It's easier to not understand what's going on. And the more we can keep our society segmented, the harder it is to understand. Like I have, in the past few weeks, I have had white people who legitimately are coming to me and asking, how can it possibly be as bad as they're saying that it can't be that bad? And I'm like, what world do you live in? And I realized that they literally live in a different world. They don't have to see those kinds of issues. And so,
Carl, I'm guilty of that. I want to tell you that one of the reasons that I am currently following so many of the leaders of the Black Lives Matter protests on Instagram. I also belong to several conservative groups on Facebook that, I'm just interested in the dialogue. But one of the reasons I started following Lee Merritt, Sean King, was because that is exactly where I came from. Like, this can't be that bad. I live in small town in Southern California, I grew up with liberals all around me. I don't see a lot of it. It's been a total, a blind spot for me. And I'm eager to try to understand the issue better and to try to understand a perspective that I do not have, obviously. And it's been like, to call it eye-opening is an understatement. I'm stunned by what I've seen, what I've learned. And it breaks my heart to say this, but I thought our country was a much more noble place than it is in terms of this issue. It's been eye-opening for me.
Yeah, so completely different background. Just briefly, I grew up in Detroit in the 70s and 80s, in the Brewster Project. So vastly different experience. I do also, I'm part of, Take Back Our Republic and a few other conservative groups that are in alignment with my views on anti-corruption and things like that, because I want to make it clear to them, hey, I may not agree with you on everything, but if we can come together on this, let's work together on it and let's make that happen. if we can come together on, sensible gun control laws, and, I want to hear your feedback on why you think this side is not sensible.
As you said, Carl, those issues where we see 70, 80, 90%, there is no reason. I mean, there's every reason in the world for us to get together, whatever our other, the other issues are, and let's hold people accountable for that at the city or the state or the federal level, because that's the will of the people. And we have a responsibility. And we were talking about, in this particular issue, the police unions, they have a lot of political power. Those endorsements matter to candidates, and it's not just special interest money, which we know has a big. But why are there unions and special interest money? Why do they get to decide all of our policies instead of things? I mean, well, if we have things, I mean, any issue that 70% of the American people agree on, that should be easy. That's as Carl said, low-hanging fruit. Let's get that through. But we have to hold the people accountable. And that kind of organizing is tough sometimes, because people literally won't listen to you if you don't represent a big enough voting bloc. They don't care. It doesn't. You can have the most eloquent argument in the world, and they'll listen and go, "Yep." And there's not going to be any action if you got no juice behind you. So, that's why, as going back all the way back to the question about are the protests working, or do protests work? Of course they work. I mean, look at we've already seen policy change, and we're having a conversation that literally has never been possible our entire lives until now. Real reform because of the juice behind the police unions and the profession that's been lionized. We haven't been able to have this conversation. And the only reason we are is because hundreds of thousands of people have demonstrated, and those are votes. And that movement is moving, not just the people that are in the streets. It's moving people that don't feel quite motivated enough to get out on the street, but they're listening and they're watching, and the politicians know that. So, it's the only way that anything ever gets done. And you have to fight against money. So you got to have big numbers of people in order to get something accomplished. But that's activism, and that's our responsibility as citizens.
Absolutely.
I have my stand politically, but every activist organization that I've created or worked with has been nonpartisan. A big part because roughly in the United States, a third of voters are on the left, a third of voters are on the right, and a third of voters are undecided, or they might lean one way or the other, but they won't pick a side per se. They want to make a decision based off of the issues. So that being the case, you're never going to get a majority if you only go after one side. So almost every every activist group that I've created or have risen to in the leadership of has been nonpartisan. We got a law passed for transparency in elections in the city of Tempe. We got 91% of the voters to vote for that. 91% of voters voted for the initiative. You can't get that kind of numbers if you're only going after one party or the other. And yet 4 days later, the state legislature passed a law saying that a city cannot require transparency. And I'm like, that is one of the most corrupt things I've ever heard. Now, thankfully, when we went to court, there were some loopholes that we found around that and things like that. And then about a year later, the city of Phoenix, 88% of voters voted for a law almost identical to the one that we passed in Tempe that required transparency. So people want these changes. The legislators are trying to prevent us from having them.
And I'll tell you something, Carl. I also really believe that the people that pull the strings of those legislators are the same people pulling the strings of a media that has done a great job of, you're talking about that bipartisanship, but with so many people, there's these sides, right? I mean, I feel like there are certain issues. I probably lean liberal 70% of the time. There are some things I lean conservative on. I think that any intelligent person would have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. But we see each other now as an existential threat to one another. This side, you're coming after me. You're a threat to me. You're a threat to me. And all of the fear that is fomented effectively through the media. I think John Minetti, one of our viewers, said that consumers of media outlet information have a responsibility to fact check whatever sources they are relying on. That is so true. We live in a time when there is a set of facts to fit any temperament. There isn't one. There's no longer one set of facts in at least in terms of information being provided through these outlets that are not journalist outlets. That's the thing, guys. These are entertainment outlets. They work off an advertising model. They have a vested interest in keeping us tuned in. Their purpose is not truth. It is not journalism. Their purpose is to keep you tuned in, and they do that with these dark forces of fear and things like that. And I just think that's what's created this existential threat on either sides of this divide that throws fuel on on the flame that already exists between races in our country.
Yeah, fear is a very effective tool. If you can get one group of people to be so afraid of the other group of people that they will never talk to each other, you can effectively create whatever narrative about those people that you want. And so that's part of the problem with, like, separate but equal, and, should races be segregated, or any group of people, should they do segregation? If you don't have direct access to those people, you can believe anything told about them because you have no context. It's the most ridiculous thing. My great grandmother used to tell us stories about how, so her husband was one of the first black lawyers in the country. And so they would sometimes intermingle in society with people who had never met a black person before. And they would, like, literally ask them, hey, can we see your tail? Like, seriously. Because they had been told that black people had tails. And because they had no exposure to actual black people, they bought that. So the powers that be try to create these walls and silos so that, in part, so that they can create whatever narrative that they want about the opposite side.
And that is the reason that this show exists, to create a dialogue. You might notice when people like Sarah and Mark, who fundamentally disagree with my perspective, and I think your perspective too, about the statues, for example. I want to dialogue with them. I want to understand where they're coming from, and I honor them for being here. I appreciate them being here. The show won't work anymore if everybody always agrees. So, well, Carl, you've spent an hour and 26 minutes with us. I appreciate you so much, man, and I appreciate your time. What can I share with people in terms of how can they help support you? How can they learn more about what you're doing?
So part of what we're talking about today, the key thing is Campaign Zero. If you go to joincampaign0.org, I think it is.
Is it Join Campaign Zero?
I believe so. Yeah, joincampaign0.org.
Got it.
You can get all the sources about why we believe defunding police is the right thing to do. I think there's a lot of misinformation about the effectiveness of police. I think there's a lot of misinformation about, well, you're really clear about not keeping track of data, how violent or what the responses have been. We've known since the 60s some of the better ways we could deal with crime in the way that we do. We know that the current way that we go about dealing with crime actually makes people less safe, not more safe. And so that's part of the reason why we're arguing for that. You can also go to American Anti-Corruption, the American Anti-Corruption Act.
Is it the?
It might be. You know what? The easier approach is go to represent.us.
Represent.us. Got it.
Represent.us. And we definitely have a link to the American Anti-Corruption Act in there. Represent Us is nonpartisan. Campaign Zero is nonpartisan. We welcome, we invite people from all walks of life. The only thing that we request is that you live in the United States. If you live in the United States, you have, a race in this horse. So please find out about the issues. We have a few different short films. We have things, stars. We host this year we didn't do it, but every year we have a convention called Unrig, which is all about, unrigging the system so that it works for the people. Yeah, a lot of the information you can get from those two sites. And if you want to find me on Twitter, it's cparrish817. And I welcome any questions anybody wants to follow up on or anything like that. I can definitely send you information. Like I said, part of my mission is to educate people on, the issues.
Well, Carl, thank you so much for being here. You're getting some love. Clara Meyer is on, and she said she loves you. Carol said, thank you, Carl, for being on. Denise said, thank you so much. I've got those links up for everybody to be able to support you and what you're up to, Carl. Thank you. I appreciate you, man, and I'll definitely be following as well. And please, like I say, come back and do this with us again.
Awesome. Certainly. Thank you very much for having me, guys.
Thank you for being on. And guys, that was Carl Parrish. Awesome. Really enjoyed having Carl on. Eric, what are your final thoughts on the show tonight?
Oh, my final thoughts. I've been thinking a lot about, I said, now I'm forgetting whether that was last week or the week before. I talked about educating ourselves, and I think this is crucial in terms of, you talked a little bit about, frankly, I've known you and we've been close friends for, our entire adult lives. I'm a little bit surprised at some of your naivete around the police, but maybe I just had a little bit, a few more run-ins when we were younger, and I paid attention to different things than you did. But so educating ourselves, as you always impress me with the way that you attack. If you want to know something about, you just go after it, and you really have a lot of integrity about how you gather information, and I appreciate that. And it's inspiring to me. But I also wanted to say that part of this work is personal. Part of the work when you're talking about racism, or you're talking about uncovering two or more sides of an issue, part of that work is personal.
Sure.
But this isn't just personal. The world doesn't change all that much. Hopefully I'll have a little bit of influence if I get more educated myself. But we really do need activism. We need to hold our representatives accountable. And if we want to see changes in the way that our communities are kept safe, if we want to see individuals that are protecting and serving rather than enforcing the law, we want to see proper treatment of people with mental illness. We want to see people who are houseless treated with dignity and respect. We want to see people with, on and on. Those things aren't going to change by themselves. We have to contact and put pressure on and organize at the city and state level for policing issues. Almost everything is going to be at the city or state level, county. Those things are more local, but activism is absolutely necessary. And as I said earlier, and I believe that we as citizens have a responsibility. I certainly wish that people would start thinking more about what our responsibilities are rather than what our rights are. And so that's me to close tonight. Thanks.
Right on. Thank you, Eric. And just to comment on my naivete about the police and what you're talking about. Listen, I like anybody, I see life through lenses, and I have family and friends who are police officers locally, and I know them to be good people, and I just feel like I have a willful ignorance in the direction of hoping for the best, about people, and of course, I really got to tell you, it doesn't mean I support the police I know and care about anymore, but it doesn't mean it doesn't mean I support them any less. But I really feel like this isn't a liberal conservative thing. I feel like my eyes are open to just how many people in law enforcement feel entitled to handle circumstances with violence first, and it's disturbing to me. And now, Eric, if you don't mind, I'm going to stick up for my people. So this is the way I see it. We're going to close it up tonight with this my little contribution to this conversation. These are my thoughts. This is separate from the show. That means they're not open to debate. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, you can always disagree with me. I'm going to start it off with a quote, as I often do. Collective fear stimulates herd instinct and tends to produce ferocity toward those who are not regarded as members of the herd. That is from Bertrand Russell, who was no stranger to bigotry. Bertrand Russell grew up in Europe during World War II, and he was a Jew. And what I truly see as the root cause of all the division in my country and the violence today, it's that same villain lurking in the subconscious, or rather the unconsciousness of our society, collective fear. The heart of racism is that fear of the other, the boogeyman foreigner who doesn't look, dance, eat, or believe like you, come to take what is rightfully yours. Listen, nobody joins the KKK out of courage. Why do you think they wear masks? All of this division is born of fear. And fear on its own is dangerous enough, but collective fear is, quite frankly, the granddaddy of all evil. Think of all the worst people you can conjure throughout history. Adolf Hitler, Pol Pot, Idi Amin, Stalin, Mussolini. These names are synonymous with massacres and genocide. Well, they could not have done it alone. Each of these people needed to generate and foment collective fear in order to create a movement that would carry out their grisly visions. Fear lives in the dark places of our hearts and minds, but collective fear moves out of those hearts and into the mob, and that's when things get real ugly. So how do we dismantle this collective fear? I feel that it's important to give our compassion and our patience to the underdogs in this fight. White America. Yeah, no, you heard me right. May sound crazy. Don't white people have all the power? What are they afraid of? But it's very true. Fear feeds on power. Power is one of the things the powerful fear losing. And right now there are many in the white community who sense they are losing power, and it frightens them. Now, I know that right now things look skewed the other way. The constructs and systems of American power seem quite invincibly and clearly stacked against the marginalized and the minorities. However, I believe that what we are witnessing is the violent death rattle of that antiquated societal mode. And it's most violent because it is in the throes of a desperate but futile attempt to stay alive. That's why you see all this crazy stuff, like the death threats against Sean King and the young girl being lit on fire. Violence as the weapon of the desperate. Let me tell you what I mean. According to Brookings census, there will be no more white majority population in the U.S. as early as 2045. It's 25 years away. According to this data and many other models, the engine of future growth and leadership in our country will be the demographic currently defined as minority youth. Now, I think that's cool. I have 2 children. I know many of these kids are teenagers. They are different, and they are different in a good way. Black, brown, Asian, white, straight, gay, they don't give a shit. They seem to commingle far more easily than the past generations of American. And at any rate, the signs point to this. Like it or not, the supremacy of the white heterosexual male in the U.S. is very likely coming to an end. And I say that as a white heterosexual male. What does it mean? Well, it means that the systems that protect that particular way of life are going to change as well. Much of that change is already knocking at our doorstep. I mean, what is all of this trouble with the police and the Black Lives Matter protest? Is it really just the same old, same old? I don't think it is. This time it feels different. I think this is about a shift in the actual balance of power in our nation. And the data ain't too hopeful for those who have enjoyed the rule of power for so long. It means all that is important to that demographic of people, from culture to religion to economics, all of that is likely to shift. And the people who cling to that way of life aren't going to let it go without a fight. So it's up to us, those of us who embrace a progressive vision of the future, to celebrate the movement toward equality, to make damn sure that we don't let that fight happen in the streets with frightened, violent people facing off against one another. It needs to happen in the courtrooms, from the podium, and in the ballot boxes, and more importantly, in the hearts and minds of each other. And it will only be won in the collective consciousness, which makes sense because that's the same place the collective fear comes from. I want to look at the players and see who's really in trouble here. I mean, the African American community, are they being brutalized by police forever? Yeah, of course. So the history of Black America is horrifying. But it seems to me they know exactly what to do right now. They're creating organized, passionate movement that's taken the whole world by storm. It's bent on justice and equality. And I know it's not perfect. There's some crazy fringe elements out there lighting crap on fire and causing chaos. There always are. But the majority of Americans of all colors who are protesting in a peaceful, organized way right now have started a global movement because they know exactly what they want and they're getting it. We are starting to look deeply at our systems and laws to see if we can make them more equitable for the people who feel oppressed. I fail to see how that could be a bad thing. So a few statues have to come down. I know some of our viewers feel passionately about this. I'm cool with that. If those statues are making my fellow citizens feel as if the most painful aspects of their history isn't being respected, then I say, let's put up some new statues. The whole cultural heritage thing, I mean, I don't think our heritage should be celebrated all the time. If I want my kids to learn about our nation's history, I'll take them to the library to read books, not to the park to look at statues. That's not white guilt. It's not self-loathing. I love myself. And almost every white person I know is a wonderful human being. But we are the ones who are seeming to have trouble with the power shift. Or at least the most powerful among us with the most to lose. To all the populations of people in the U.S. to whom the lamp of equality has shone inconsistently at best, blacks, yes, but also the LGBTQ population, Latinos, women, I say what I say now to you from the firm belief that the future belongs to you. You have the microphone, you have the stage, you have the moral high ground. Use it with the highest principles of love and courage. Let your anger be heard, but only to expose the evils of collective fear that have ravaged your communities. You will design the future to some extent, so may I give you a small bit of direction? If you can, make your gods a little less vengeful and petty. Make your economic system a little less greedy. Make your politics a little less corrupt. We'll all be happier. So will you. And to all my progressive brothers and sisters, here's where I want to recommend that we start to show what power is for. To be used in the service of the community, the entire community. We need to think of ourselves as teachers charged with raising belligerent students. They still have to learn the lessons, even if they're jerks. I can't stand bigotry, but we do have to live with bigots. We have to. Because the alternative is to create a slightly more justifiable, but every bit as destructive version of the current divided state. Someone has to create an America that is the land of the free for everyone, even if you're an asshole. You've heard of punch a Nazi, right? I get it. I know. But I have a new movement. Hug a bigot. Okay, don't actually do that because a lot of them are large and angry. But do listen. Let me tell you guys, I sat with a member of my family this week who was an older person and listened to how that person said they were going to buy a gun in case black people came into their houses. Now, this is a person I related to closely. It's insane. She got that from Fox News. I talked about it earlier. They're fomenting all this fear and terror. They're coming for you. But I leaned down to where I was eye level with her, and I said, you know this, though. You know that all groups of people, the police, Hispanics, Asians, you know that all groups of people are mostly good people, and there's just a few bad ones that act out and get attention, right? And she said, you're right, even white people do that. Now, that's not like she's going to win any humanitarian awards for this, but there was a shift there because I didn't make her evil for being ignorant. Now, right now, I get it. We're out in the streets and the word is resist, fight. And this is the time for that, especially when it looks like a cause for justice might win. But I can't help but wonder what happens after the fight is won. Do progressives make all who disagree with them horrible people for not seeing things their way? And how is that different from bigotry? Look, if you're woke, hopefully it was love that awakened you. Love doesn't become the dictator of others' beliefs from a self-righteous platform. Gandhi, we talked about him earlier in the text thread. There's a wonderful scene in the movie, and it's taken from his actual life when he's fasting, laying in a bed, and there's battle ravaging outside between Muslims and Hindus. A Hindu man comes to Gandhi and leans by his bedside and tells him, I killed a little boy with my own bare hands. I smashed his head with a rock, a little Muslim boy. And Gandhi says, why did you do that? And the man says, because they killed my son. So Gandhi says to this man who's weeping, and the man says, I'm in hell. And he puts his head down weeping. And Gandhi says, I know a way out of hell. Go find a young Muslim boy who's been made an orphan by this war and raise him as your own, but raise him as a Muslim. Gandhi was trying to dismantle the herd mentality that leads to collective fear and all of its evils by exposing this man who was in so much pain, who had lost so much, to the truth that there's only one herd and we are all in it. As long as we refuse to see that, we will all be in the same hell. Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, whatever gods or heroes we make these people into and build statues to them and all that stuff, they were all people with the same simple mission: to show us a way out of hell. I hope this time we have the strength and the courage to follow them. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. This is Common Ground. This is our show. We'll be back next week. As always, we really appreciate your participation. And this was our one-year show, our one-year anniversary. So thank you guys very much for being here on this auspicious occasion. I want to thank our guests, Carl Parrish. I want to thank our guest, Ben Leanos. And listen, I also want you to know that next week we'll be back with Terry Gertzman, who's an immunotoxicologist, talking again about what's going on with coronavirus. And she's going to be bringing along a friend of hers, Scott. I forget. He's a virologist. So we're going to get deeply into the discussion about what's happening with COVID-19 and coronavirus. So I hope you'll join us. Share the good word. I'll get it out there to you. Guys, have a safe night. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.